We didn't play it. I don't know if you have it handy, Matt. Um, but the More Perfect Union video about
Yes.
about the PRO Act. Actually, if we could put that up, I think that'd be really helpful to handle this. Because I remember when this first started to become a sort of normal thing was in like 2013, 2014. The term they were using then, and I only know this because I was like a college student interested in media. The term they were using then was called native media. Have you heard this
Yes.
term before, Matt?
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember all the native media sort of navel gazing, like, should we allow this companies to just like lie to you and not tell you that it's them? And it's like, oh, maybe
Yeah.
we should, and ultimately decide we can.
So for people who aren't familiar with, I mean, because this is a very much a part of our reality now, but it was a new
Yeah.
thing. Like in our lifetime, it was a new thing. Native media is different from like a traditional ad, where like a traditional ad is like, okay, here's a bit in the newspaper that's like, this is an ad, right? Native media is where you would have something that would appear to be like a news story, the newspaper, or like a legit segment on a TV or online video show. And you would make it seem like it was just like any other report. And then maybe have like something at the very bottom of the screen say like, oh, this is paid for by Shell or BP or whatever.
Yeah, often, or like a cigarette company.
Yeah. The point, which is ridiculous. And the point, obviously, of native media is to confuse people. It's to do propaganda in like the most strong sense of the word, the most strong negative connotation of the word. And we're seeing this again against union organizing.
Of Commerce has come out in favor of aspects of the COVID-19 relief package, investing in infrastructure during the early days of the Biden administration. But they are raising concerns about a new workforce bill being considered called the PRO Act.
It's called the PRO Act.
What is the PRO Act and why is it bad for business?
Well, look, I really appreciate this opportunity because it's one of the most consequential pieces of legislation that could impact every American family, every American community, on American workers and American families
that no one's ever heard of.
I think too few people have been able to understand the PRO Act or have even heard of it, and yet it's a sweeping rewrite of U.S. labor law.
There's sweeping ramifications of this bill.
If you aren't unionized, it will make it easier to do that by taking away the right to a secret ballot.
Taking away the right for a secret ballot to unionize.
Insane.
Threaten private ballots. Under the PRO Act, union leaders could come to your house and force you to sign a card right there and then about whether or not you think a union should be formed.
Well, this is very important information.
It's Washington, D.C. deciding what's right for Virginians.
Which makes Washington, D.C. come into your state and decide what works. We don't want Washington, D.C. to decide what's right for Arizona.
Well, Suzanne, oftentimes the citizens, we don't know what are in these bills that are often hundreds, if not 1,000 pages long.
I think if people understood what was in this bill, they would be up in arms, calling their senators. Contact your senators. There's a simple one-pager and a pass-through that will let you send an email right away and let your senators know that this bill is not good for Georgia.
Hey, thank you so much for your time, Suzanne, and for enlightening us on this subject. We so appreciate it. Oh, thank you so much to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring that segment.
Oh god.
Insane. Like, I mean, like that is straight up like if you're watching this and you're not worried when you see what the ramifications of native, like we knew when this concept of native content, what it was going to be used for. But if you're seeing something like that, and even like I'm sorry, like even if you are like a diehard libertarian, anti-union person, right? You should see that shit is extremely misleading and is propaganda in the full sense of the word.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could go back to that Scandinavian model. Anybody who was involved with any of the production on that should be absolutely shunned. Like, how do you live with yourself? You're supposed to be a journalist. And this happens all the time. Like, I feel like maybe as John Oliver got a compilation of another lobby effort like this, where they can just literally, like, local news is a menace. Like, the way it's owned and operated, it's like the minor, it's all the problems of like the mainstream news with none of like the sort of national accountability. It's just like let's see what the police station has to us as to like what crimes we can scare the community about. And if we can get stories ready made and packaged, that's, you know, that's me going on lunch early. And I mean, that's just despicable.
It's despicable. And honestly, like local news, like, you know, we were talking about with Cale Brooks in the main show today about, you know, some of the statistics that he was bringing up in his piece in Jacobin, going from posting to politics, about how 85% of Americans follow politics casually, right? They understand, like I'm saying, our opponents understand that, and that's why they do this kind of thing, right? Because, oh, you're putting this on your local news site. I mean, more people do interact with their local news sites, and that's why there's such an effort to control those. I'm sure like Matt had the same reaction that I do. I think people maybe who are from like big cities might not realize how important these local news stations are to, you know, informing a lot of people, or disinforming, whatever you want to say that, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, it was massive. I don't know like how newer generations are reacting to it, but in North Dakota, like it
Old
was
folks though.
Oh, absolutely. I have memories of both grandparents. Yeah, you would watch both sets of nightly news, like the 5 or 6 o'clock and the 10 o'clock. And that was every night. And would have like the farm reports, the weather, and local sports, and a lot of that packaged crap. But I think it was, at least back then, they had budgets to like have multiple reporters on different beats. And now it is, you get this, it's mass distributed, like mass produced garbage.
And it's insane because you couldn't do this as a politician, right? Like you couldn't just get that kind, like you have to provide like equal access if you're going on the channel, on the show. You know, so to do that is really despicable. To lie about what the PRO Act is, which is like, I'm sorry, the PRO Act, we're very supportive of it because it is sweeping in its ability to really restructure the playing field for unionization. But functionally, what it's doing is just resetting the union struggle to what it had been for a very long time in American history, up until like the 1970s, which for casual viewers of this video meant that you went from a period of time where people saw a gradual increase in their wage with the increase in GDP, right, of the United States. And what we've seen ever since these anti-union laws started to take place across the country, GDP went up, wages, when adjusted for inflation, stagnated. That's a very significant, you know, reality that people need to be able to reckon with. That came with concerted efforts by the business elite to undermine labor law. The PRO Act is not doing anything particularly radical. It's radical in what it could do for our society, but it's basically saying we're just going to go back to very common sense election processes for unions, and to make sure that the bosses and the corporations aren't able to stack the deck against any kind of unionization effort in their setting on the shop floor.
Yeah, just one example from Bessemer is when they expanded the size of the working unit by 3-4-fold, making it way more difficult and the job way bigger. They wouldn't have been allowed to do that with the PRO Act. So yeah, I mean, I can understand why business wouldn't be happy with it.
And you know, I mean, there's a lot we can say about that clip because it's so infuriating. But you know, to really highlight why, one, like, these talking points are bad, we got to confront them. But two, like their ability to just be able to put this out there as if it was like a news segment is really sinister. Any journalist worth their salt would have confronted them when they said that the PRO Act would make it legal. Like, let's get this very clear. They said the PRO Act would make it legal for union organizers to show up at your house and force you to sign a unionization card. Like, can we get how insane that claim is? There's nothing in the PRO Act that says that a union official can show up to your house and tie you and your wife to the kitchen table to sign a unionization card. They can go to your house and say, hey, would you be interested in joining with your brothers and sisters on the shop floor about this. And you know what you can always do? Say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Like
What you can't do to the what you can't do to the forced meetings that your bosses give you to tell you about how bad unions are. You can't say no there.
I mean, it's just so despicable. One, to give them that ability to just like say whatever they want. But like when you listen to actually what they're saying, it's exceptionally misleading, and despicable. And you know, again, we need to be pushing as hard as we can for the PRO Act. But this is another example. We talk a lot about this show, and we talked a lot about this on TMBS. This is why the crisis of local media is something that people need to take very seriously. This is not just Matt and I getting worked up about this because we sort of work in media and journalism, right? This is a very real threat to like having a democratic process. If corporations or, you know, organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce can just show up and just put propaganda out there and have it presented as if it's a legit news story.
Using all the style and aesthetics of news, just monetizing that and selling it, and commoditizing that like sense of trust. I mean, really, really despicable. And you wonder why the media is not trusted.